help us be able to position CED within the big tent of economic activity that's trying to make our community work better for everyone. So you get to hear from Dave today.
And Dave is joined by Sarah Leeson-Klim, Regional Director for Manitoba with Canadian CED Network. She has been with CEDNet since 2011, engaging CEDNet Manitoba's member, creating learning programs and the Enterprising Nonprofits Program for Social Enterprise Development before becoming Regional Director in 2014. Sarah is an active in her neighborhood as a board member of the Daniel McIntyre St. Matthew's Community Association and is a dedicated board member of the Growing Rainbow Trout Music Festival. So please welcome Dave and Sarah.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? How's everybody doing? Oh, yeah. Go for it.
It's everybody from Winnipeg.
That's my fan club over there. The secret is that I'm a bigger fan of them than they are of me. I get to work with the most amazing group of people. A bunch of them are sitting over there, so what a pleasure to have them here. I told them they weren't allowed to not be here because I need them to be around. This is such a pleasure. It's a pleasure both to be up here with Dave and also to get to be the person who brings some reflections to this great event. And this is a thing I love to do, is to kind of try to synthesize or grab some of the things that have been happening. So I've been doing that throughout the week. Dave couldn't join us until today, so I've been trying to kind of capture some of the ideas and think about them, and we're going to have a conversation to reflect on some of what's been happening, and also think a bit about Dave's role here and ATB's role here and the role of financial institutions and some of the work that we do. And I ran into David LePage at the back, and he said I had a good little nugget, I could say, that would help us kind of put Dave in the context of some of this work. That back in the day, he was part of, I think it's called Social Venture Partners. Social Venture Partners was the first place to fund a social purchasing portal. So some of you know that word, social purchasing portal. There's only one left now, it's in Winnipeg. But that set of ideas or places was really what kind of prompted the discussion around market access and procurement and how we start to shift the way that big institutions and big purchasers, people spending money places, how they can start to do that in a way that really supports the work that we all care about. And that's really morphed into what Buy Social Canada is and what a lot of us are doing around trying to make that work. So how about that?
That's great.
Yeah.
I think we should send David LePage out for carbon dating to find how old he is.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. He's got David LePage has quite a memory bank of stories, some of which are appropriate for stages and a lot of which aren't. So in that vein, let's start. And why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? And I think I was lucky enough to be part of a workshop called Leadership for the New Economy yesterday. And we had a great conversation about some good leadership programs that are happening, and also just about how becoming really aware of yourself, of your sense of self, of how you fit as an individual into things is what is a key piece of what makes people leaders and good leaders. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey here and any turning points or moments that really brought you to the place that you are today?
Great, I sure will. This is a tough audience. I'm going to have one eye that goes this way and one eye that goes this way. I've only worked for 3 places. I worked for the Business Development Bank for a while, and so I lived across Canada. I lived in Manitoba and in Quebec, lived in Montreal for 5 years, and Vancouver and various other places. And then I had the opportunity to start Vancity Capital. At Vancity, we wanted to create a kind of a venture capital source for both purpose-driven organizations, but also we even lent some mezzanine capital to nonprofit organizations. So I was different, very different, and it was an opportunity to use kind of banking skills that I had developed and just apply them in new ways. And then I was in the right place at the right time. I got the opportunity to be the CEO at Vancity, and we had a terrific run. We had a great, everybody kind of looks at you and wants to ask about the Vancity Board of Directors and stuff. But we had a terrific board during that period of time. Quite a number of people flowed through, and we got some amazing things done. And it was a learning for me to really apply some of the tools of finance into nonprofit organizations, community economic development, communities themselves, and even marginalized groups of people with amazing success. I can say that because I didn't really do much of the work. Everybody else did, but they did some amazing things. And then 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to come to ATB. ATB is even more unique than Vancity in the way it's owned. I think there's only one of them probably in the world that, and it's got quite a history to it, but also has an opportunity to do some pretty interesting things with financial tools. And so that's kind of been my entire career at ATB. We threw away our mission statement and vision statement and purpose statements, and we have a story. It's 94 words long, and it talks about kind of what we want to do. And one of the things we talk about is doing things other banks wouldn't do. And it isn't to give away things, it's really to try and figure out how to kind of take the black out of the black box and let people see how finance works, and then trying to harness it in a way that you can be sustainable. You got to make some money in the deal, but that you can do some pretty wonderful things. So there's, I'm sure we'll get to talk about them, but that's kind of how I got to here.
Sure. I'm also realizing I didn't bring a timepiece up with me, so I might just look over this way occasionally, and you can give me a bit of a heads up. We can just give you a piece of paper to let you know when you're ready. Thank you. Okay, so the idea of kind of doing things that other banks wouldn't, I think, leads into a really important theme that we've had. It's one of our named themes, but it's also really been one of the highlights and points of conversation is around doing business differently. And I think we could expand that to say kind of doing everything a bit differently. And that's one of the common factors of all the people in the room here is that we all, I think, approach problems in our communities in ways that other people don't, other organizations, systems, institutions don't. And the thing that I've noticed, and I hope this resonates with people, is that when we do that, we find ourselves walking kind of full on into this environment of complexity that's really challenging. We've got to use our minds in ways that a lot of people don't. And we have to balance a set of tensions constantly that are challenging for us. And a big one that I've heard throughout the week, starting right from the beginning with Chief Joseph, is the idea that one of the things we need to explore is the need to slow down a little bit and to really focus. He was talking about reconciliation, but I think this is true overall. Really focus on a person-to-person, relationship-based way of working, that deep set of engagement that we often feel is lacking in our communities. But at the same time, in the very same moment, in the same heart of each of us, is this need to make change as fast as we can because there's an urgency around the problems that we're facing. Certainly, in my work in Winnipeg, I work in one of the poorest postal codes in Canada, and I just see the depth of urgency. So that creates this tension. We need to kind of slow things down, bring it down to the local level, bring it down to this heart space, relationship space, but we want to run full head on into change. What do you think about that? Does it resonate with you? And what do you think are some of the ways that we can start to approach that? How do we scale? How do we grow? We talked about this a bit before, but still maintain that deep principled way of working.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a little bit earlier when we were talking about, people were talking about the economies of networks.
Yeah, someone earlier, I'm not sure if she's still here, from the Democracy Collaborative mentioned that phrase, economies of network, and it rang like a bell in my mind. So,
because I think sometimes, you talk about the pace of things, and definitely it feels like the pace of business is speeding up. And sometimes we just think of automation and technology and things like that allow us to do things quickly, but I think what allows you to go really fast is really those deep personal relationships, about building trust. Because, we kind of have this idea that, we hear about Silicon Valley and we hear about the companies that are working there, and we have this idea that there's something special about them. And when you go talk to them, they aren't. They're just people, just every bit like us, like the people in this room. But I think what makes some of that sector go very fast are quite deep relationships, that people trust each other, and you build that foundation of trust, and then you can go pretty quickly. You can get things done. I mean, any lawyers in the room? No wonder you're so successful. You know, I mean, theoretically, if everybody trusted everybody, what was that Jim Carrey movie where he could never tell a lie or whatever? Like, we'd never need any lawyers. And that would be a good world, because things would go based on relationships and trust instead of a sheaf of papers. And sometimes we think a sheaf of paper can replace trust, and it can't. Mm-hmm. And so I think the really deep relationships we can build are super important to do, and it's worth spending the time to do this, because that's what makes stuff go fast. That allows you to get the pace and go quickly. Yeah.
Another one of the tensions that I've been identifying is a lot of us come from a place of asset-based community development as a starting point, and really, really localized, kind of hyper-local models where we fine-tune what we're doing right around the context of the environment we're working in. And that's produced incredible outcomes. We see really great programs get created that way, but they're also hard to scale because they're made for that place. And so we're talking about that economies of network, and you said something that also kind of rang a bell in my head. Is we need that set of connections, and we probably need groups like ATB to help make some of that happen. We need networks, we need intermediaries. But you talked about having kind of a mental space of abundance, and I think, like, not just thinking big, but it's kind of a different concept. Would you say more about what that means, a mental space of abundance?
Yes. So I think sometimes we think scale, and we think thinking big, and we think that means we're going to make this across Canada, or across the world, or North America, or something like that. And I think more importantly is that kind of thinking of exponential thinking, or kind of an abundant kind of viewpoint, that sharing, like lots of times, and even in some social service, CED, community organizations, even cooperatives. Like, I worked in Van City, and we'd say we were part of a cooperative movement, but there was lots of time there wasn't much cooperation between credit unions, and so we didn't. So that's the opposite of abundant thinking. I think the idea that really there aren't any secrets, especially in this work. There's no proprietary information. What there is proprietary execution. I could tell you and I will tell you everything you want to know about ATB. I just think our team of people can execute. And so I think having that viewpoint that we can think in an expansive manner, not for the sake of bigger is better, but it's to have more impact. And and not to cast, I'm not insulting anybody in this room, but I think one of the limitations in some of the stuff I've been involved with is people don't think in that manner. They think about because even you said, you're very hyper local. Mm-hmm. But if you sit and think about that, there will be some common denominators, that it's not just working in that community just because it's that community. I think we convince ourselves we're special, we're different. It's different here. And I think we're maybe 20% different or 10% different, but we're mostly 70 or 80%. The value drivers, the things that work, will work. And so you see it in the venture capital business. I've been in venture capital for a long time, and there's just some people who will have a process or technology, and they can see this is what it does, and there's other people that can see this is what it does. And I think that's in community economic development. I think we got to be thinking more like this to find ways to have impact, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time.
Yeah. Another piece, I think this is a uniquely formed question for you at ATB. Another kind of theme that's come out is there's lots of great things happening, but we do things differently, and that sometimes makes it hard for us to interact with financial institutions, also with governments, also with other folks. Like big systems, big players, sometimes aren't sure what to do with us when we do community wealth building, or we do cooperative building, or we do a scale based on a networked group of independent organizations rather than one company getting bigger. How do you think a group like ATB or our financial partners can start to really engage and enable this work, and what are some of the ways that ATB is doing that here?
I think one of the things with banks and credit union, I'm just going to use the word banks for financial institutions, is we kind of talk a different language. It's a bit of a black box. You don't really understand how we think and how we work through decision making and things like that. So I think the more transparency, because I tell my mother, banking is really hard. You have to be really smart. She did. She's biased. So banking is not very hard, and the easiest part we have to teach people is the banking part. The harder part is the personal relationships and relationship building and things like that. But for some reason, and sometimes even as an industry, we kind of revel. We kind of like the fact that nobody really understands it, and it just allows us to be a bit arbitrary and judgmental and all the good stuff that goes with having a black box that nobody understands. So I think that, working toward transparency to try and take that shroud off of financial tools. And we see it a lot in kind of financial literacy. Like, I could give this room a test on what factors go into your credit score or beacon score, and I'm pretty sure you'd have a failing grade. Like I'm sure I shouldn't go to this. I could go and pick 50 people out of the nearest 5 banks and bring them in, and I think they would probably. So that's a great example. Lots of people in this room don't have a clue how their credit score is derived, and so that means we got the rules of the game, we got we got the stadium. And we kind of let you look in the windows. And so that isn't very, and part of the reason we think, oh wow, if we told everybody all about it, they'd just game it kind of thing. And that's kind of the point. You're trying to change behavior. So I think things like that go an awful long way to, because as I say, it isn't hard. And if you kind of take the blinds off, it's kind of fairly simple. People can see what goes into making decisions. And then that, especially in a community economic development setting, is if all it is us in the financial institutions trying to think of things, you tend to get, our biases, and it's just us thinking of ideas. But the more people understand financial tools, then you got hundreds of people thinking of solutions to use those exact same tools. It's just like a paintbrush. If I give it to 10 different people, they'll paint 10 different pictures. Yeah. So if I can give that banking paintbrush, to this room, all of a sudden you can paint pictures I'd never dream of.
You told me about 2 things that ATB is doing that I think illustrate that well, and I think are pretty cool examples of how communities and financial institutions can start to work together in good ways. And one was about, I can't remember the name of it now, the wisdom of the crowd, working at how we can get more investment, and the other was the incredible project in Edmonton around Boyle Street. Can you talk about the 2 of those?
Sure. And I think Sandra Huckaluk, or if you're Ukrainian, Husalak.
I'm Ukrainian, Husalak, for sure. Let's compare pierogi notes after.
So Sandra's kind of the brains of, it's called 4 Directions, which is kind of speaks to that taking the shrouds off things. So we have about 200 branches in Alberta, and Boyle Street is kind of the poorest postal code maybe in Alberta, Edmonton anyway, it's that kind of downtown, largely Aboriginal community, lots of homeless and lots of financially marginalized people. And the Boyle Centre is one of those community groups that services them in all kinds of different ways. And so essentially what we've done is kind of given them a banking franchise. It'd be like a Subway, you know. So they've opened up a bank inside of the Boyle Centre. And what it does is allow people who have probably never had a bank account before, or certainly haven't had one in recent history, to get a bank account. And, you know, the best, well, there's lots of great things about it. The thing I like the best is that, well, a couple of things. So my mother would always say, he's never finished a sentence yet. So a couple of the cool things about it. One is, so it doesn't cost us anything. If you wanted to start a bank tomorrow, you'd have to get the security systems and the banking systems and the general ledger and cash systems and all of that stuff and apply to Canadian Payments Association. We already have that. So all we did was basically stick a pipe into ATB, and they became like our 201st branch. But it's staffed with Boyle Street people, and Boyle Street keeps any money they make. So got about 500 and some customers already. So I'm pretty sure that it'll make $50,000 or $100,000 a year profit. And really what it does is it creates a kind of a closed loop in the community, because if the government just sends out checks and people take them to a check casher, or they get it stolen, or whatever might happen, it leaks out of that community. And what this does is these people now have a bank account. The government sends their checks, direct deposits to them. And it's got an ATM. People can take out $20 a day if that's what they need. So it just creates a recycling machine in that little community, and so all the money kind of stays there. And stuff that would have, you know, been earned by other companies servicing the community, the Boyle Centre now does. And so you get unlimited transactions. You can do everything, and it's $9 a month. You know, lots of times you'd pay $30 or $40 just to get your check cashed. So this is and you don't get a big wad of, you know, you can take it out so you don't get robbed or lose it or stuff like that. So I think it's a little perpetual motion machine. And so if you can replicate it there, you could do it on reserve. We're looking at doing it in, there's a couple of, Bow Valley College is an organization that really caters to trades and immigrants, and there's other organizations. So it's a very replicatable model. And so if you kind of think abundantly, it might, you know, it's kind of the franchise version of banking, custom made for the community that operates in. And there's lots of respect for the organization because it's the Boyle Street. So like if it was just our bank or somebody else's bank, it would be kind of the man, and nobody would really care about it. They wouldn't respect it. And because it's the Boyle Community Centre that owns it, everybody takes care of it. They protect it. Anyway, I can go on and on about stories. But the other cool thing is, one of the things in financial services and marginalized people is ID. You know, who are you? Show me your ID. I lost my ID. And then it's a bind. And that's the beginning of being marginalized, is, you know, is losing your ID or not having it. And, you know, there's ID programs all across the country to keep that. So this branch in the poorest postal code in Alberta leapfrogged every single bank, maybe in North America, but certainly in Canada. So it's all biometrics. There's no ID. It's either your retina or your finger. So all of a sudden, and it's interesting, Sandra did all of the work, because we were kind of, oh God, are people going to like this? Or, yeah. So, you know, so there's biases creeping in right there, right? But when Sandra went and talked to everybody, they thought it was pretty cool. Yeah. And when they walk in and they do this and their account comes up, that's them. It gave them identity. Like, it's funny, I got a driver's license, I can show it to you. It's kind of, but when they put their finger on or their eye in, it's that is them. So it's almost like they they were given an identity. It's always with them. They can never lose it. And now they don't have to freak out when they're coming to the bank because they know they're always carrying who they are.
That's amazing, and I think it's a really cool illustration of what it means to do business differently. I'm fortunate to be a member of a Assiniboine credit union who's done some interesting things like that as well. And when we start seeing that, where an institution would recognize that Boyle Street should be the ones that really run that show, they've got the community trust, they've got the community connections, but ATB can do that back end part of it and can figure out that system. We start to see really powerful things emerge, which is very hopeful. And unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about the other initiative. If you want to hear about a cool crowdfunding idea, you should grab Dave and ask him about it.
Can I do 1 minute on it? Not to advertise it.
Okay. They're the bosses,
but only just because and I'm not really touting our horn, but there's clues for all of us here. So what this crowdfunding thing does is we got an exemption from the Securities Commission, and so if you were going to start up organization, you put your story up, and then people who are funders can fund you. And so funders are in small chunks, of between $1,000 and $3,000. So if you were raising $50,000, you'd put your story up, and people would essentially lend you $1,000 at a time. We consolidate all into a loan, so there's only really one loan. But what we're doing is we're parking our credit criteria on these. And so if you put up, you're going to borrow $50,000, once the crowd gets to $25,000, we're saying, I wonder if the crowd's smarter than us. And so when half of it gets funded, we're going to fund the rest of the half in a loan. So essentially what we're saying is, here's an experiment, is the crowd smarter than conventional banking wisdom? Mm-hmm. Banking wisdom, is that an oxymoron? Yeah. Hey.
My partner's a banker, and I'm going to take that home with me, definitely.
The one quick thing is the clue here for all of us to think about is what sells that thing is its story. And when you bring that story into a bank, what sells the thing is all the square boxes and round holes you have to fit in for us as bankers. You know, what are your sales? What are your expenses? What's this? What's your rent? You know, how much of a down payment do you have and stuff like that. And so that's all good stuff, I guess, for banking. But what that does is create a lot of round pegs and a lot of square holes. And so what this does is kind of get rid of that, and it's your story that sells the idea. Because there's lots of compelling stories that get frustrated because they can't meet bank criteria and stuff. And so this is taking the banky stuff out of it and making it run on the story, which might be a big clue to filling that gap of what we see now as difficult to finance or unbankable or stuff as a bank we can't get our mind around. Because the people we find registering as investors are pretty much people who have done well, all walks of life, but they want to put back, and they're not giving it away because they lend it, and I think people pay between 4% and 6% interest and stuff like that. But they are kind of doing it for the story. So, so it consolidates a whole bunch of people that are willing to back stuff because of how the story resonates. And in a lot of the work that you guys do, it's the story that resonates as opposed to the mechanics of it. Anyway, sorry.
And so we're gonna have to wrap up here pretty quickly. So maybe just as a last question, just really quickly, kind of off the top of your mind, you and I have talked a lot about what we've talked about here. You're getting a sense of the cool audience that we've got. If you thought about this work and like we're looking into the future, what makes you most hopeful?
I think to start off with, the fact that the people are here that are the people that are doing the work, I think is a really good thing. And, for all the academics in the crowd, close your ears for a second. There's just way too many people in this space that kind of postulate about stuff and never do anything. And I'm not criticizing it, because if you work closely with people and get stuff done, I guess that's the linkage we need. But I think getting groups of people like this who actually do the work, and then, if you can get people to think abundantly and open that sharing community in, because sometimes when we get as a group we tend to show off a little bit. The sharing becomes a look at me, look how good my programs are. And if you can get it to the practitioners, I think you can get it to the spot where you're genuinely trying to share information to either scale up ideas or just kind of infect others or learn from other people. And so I think that's really, really important.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I think I've had the great pleasure of being able to hang out with Dave for the last couple of hours. And in my role, I work at CCEDNet, as they mentioned, so I'm one of the staff members that gets to try to motivate and make some of this stuff happen. I'm actually going to take a couple of these ideas back with me, and I wanted to encourage all of you. I know some of you are members, but not all of you are. I think I'm going to take it back and think of my role at CCEDNet as cultivating that mental space of abundance. Like, that just seems remarkable to me. And so, you know, my work is really about that work when we get everybody in the room and try to get past postulating or past presenting and into what I think you all did this morning, really coaching each other and learning in that really interactive way. And that's the work that we do at CCEDNet. That's what it is to be a CCEDNet member. It's to engage in that way. And I think it's going to be a really good, inspiring moment for us as staff to think, how can we make our work be that kind of piece where we really cultivate an understanding of abundance that's different than it might be in the traditional economy, that's about this economy of network, and it's about this, how do we take the local and the finely tuned contextualized thing and make it this bigger thing that really starts to attack problems that we have. And so I'm going to do a little pitch because I'm on stage and I have a mic, that if you're not a member, I really feel like I want to encourage you to become a member. This is what we do at CCEDNet. It's a real gift to get to do it. It's a gift to get to travel from territory to territory. I'm from Treaty 1 territory. Being here in Treaty 7 territory has been wonderful. Is that the right territory? It's Treaty 7? And so I encourage you to do that so that you can be part of this, a part of making this happen, a part of learning from folks like Dave. Getting the chance to do this kind of dialogue work all the time is a real gift, and it makes our practice richer wherever we are. So I wanted to thank you for all the little nuggets you gave me that I'm going to take forward.
Welcome.
Yeah, and I want to thank the crowd for giving me those nuggets as well. And I hope that you've been doing that with each other. We're near the end. There's a few more amazing things to do before we wrap up, but let's just give ourselves a round of applause and thank each other for the incredible wisdom that we're learning. So, and thank you so much to Dave. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have to stop talking about politicians now because the finance minister just walked in.
Uh-oh.
Thanks, Dave. Hi. So huge thank you to Dave and Sarah for the conversation and providing a summary of what we've learned. I thought it was pretty interesting to talk specifically about abundance and to really focus on what is possible for how we can achieve greater prosperity. And it is pretty great examples that, Dave, you're able to highlight of doing business differently and actually pursuing innovation. So 4 directions and using biometrics, and the lender, I don't think you actually used the name, but lender is the right name for the new platform that will be coming out soon. So that was fantastic. And also a great reminder of how important relationships are.